Kevin McCullough.
Welcome back to That Kevin Show, thatkevinshow.com. Glad to have you with us. For many years, the political left has kind of quietly massaged, manipulated, effectively blackmailed corporate America into doing things many times against shareholders' desires in terms of how portfolios are built and putting effort behind controversial political and social positions on things that maybe even many of the shareholders of those companies don't even really agree with. For a long time, there's been a need for somebody to do something about this that is free market based and kind of freedom oriented. And I am glad to tell you that my friends at the Heritage Foundation have now just begun a year two of a brand new process that kind of addresses this. And here to discuss is Alan Mendenhall of the Heritage Foundation. Alan, it's good to have you on the show for the first time. Thanks for being here. How big of a problem is what we're talking about?
It's a tremendous problem, and it's an area in which the right has not participated in a long time. So for decades, the left has participated in this shareholder engagement process, and people wonder all the time, how do corporations go woke? Why do corporations go woke? If half the country's conservative and half the country's on the left, why would a company tend to lean left? Well, you can find the answer in the shareholder engagement process. So it's really important that conservatives participate in this process.
How do they go about it? What's been the strategy?
Well, anybody who owns $2,000 of a company's stock or 1% of the company can file a shareholder proposal. And so this is what initiates the process. At that point, the company will set up meetings, and if the shareholder gets what he or she wants or what it wants, then it can withdraw the proposal. Otherwise, the proposal will get put on the company's proxy statement. Management will make a recommendation to the shareholders writ large, and the shareholders will then vote on the proxy statement. But a lot of times, this ends in withdrawal, which is, in fact, what several of our proposals have ended in. And we've found that a lot of companies are really willing to let go of some of these leftist policies. They've just been waiting for somebody to ask. They're thinking, thank goodness somebody from the right is actually asking us to do it, because we felt pressure from the left for so long. If only somebody from the right had just asked us not to do this, we would have done what they wanted.
It was really telling right around the time of the last election. I'm talking presidential election in 24, because you had all of those companies that had sided against Trump in the 2020 cycle. And once he won re-election in 24, suddenly, Mark Zuckerberg turned into a blubbering buffoon of a baby. Like, he was just like, here's all the things that we were doing that we shouldn't have been doing. And it really is like, it seems as though in corporate America, there is bias that's kind of sewn into these corporations on some level, but they really are suspect or subject to the winds of change as they blow. And a lot of them saw that the country wasn't the woke hard left that had been doing some of this stuff in those 4 years in between the two Trump terms. So where does it kind of stand right now? You guys have been at this a little bit. What types of things are you engaging the corporations in discussions of, and what's been the response thus far?
Well, I'm glad you brought up Meta, because that is one of the companies we engaged with, and one of the main issues we've engaged on is companies that use Southern Poverty Law Center's diagnostic tools, including their hate map. And the unfortunate occasion for that idea was the assassination of Charlie Kirk, because Southern Poverty Law Center started to demonize TPUSA only months before Charlie Kirk's sad assassination. And so we thought, gosh, what companies are out there using these SPLC tools, which have a history of creating violent reactions? And Meta was one of the companies. We engaged with them. The engagement process was actually quite friendly, and they had multiple calls with them, and they went through and made sure that they were not using any SPLC tools throughout any of their policies, and they also wanted to make sure that in their charitable giving, because a lot of times we find that corporations use a company called Benevity in their charitable giving, so that employees try to get their employer to match their charitable giving, and only to discover that Benevity has screened out certain companies based on SPLC metrics. And so, for example, if somebody wants to give money to the Alliance Defending Freedom, they discover that, Benevity has screened out that company. I can't get a match. Well, Meta went through and made sure that none of that was taking place. So that's one issue that we're dealing with.
That
is
sounds
SPLC.
like a huge win, by the way. Meta's not a small company.
You're right. Well, we're getting huge wins. We've gotten huge wins on this particular issue at Salesforce, at Meta. We've got a couple others that we haven't announced yet because we're still in discussions on how we're going to present the conclusion publicly, but we've got some wins there. We're dealing with federal contractors that are using ESG and DEI in their executive compensation. We've got companies that are exposed to unmitigated China risk, either because their revenue base is dependent on China, or they've got supply chain issues in China, or they've got data or IP issues with China. So we're engaging companies on that basis, and we're engaging regional banks with misaligned policies. So I'm in D.C. right now. My office is in D.C., but I live in Alabama, and Regions Bank is a regional bank headquartered in Birmingham, Alabama, that is doing all this ridiculous ESG, DEI, woke stuff, which is completely misaligned with its consumer base. I mean, it operates in red states like Alabama and Tennessee and Georgia and Florida, and yet it was implementing policies that were completely at odds with its consumer base. And so we're looking at regional banks that are doing those types of things as well.
Have you run into significant brick walls with any of the major corporations or banks that you've worked with thus far?
So the vast majority of the companies we've engaged have been professional, have been friendly, and very open to what we're doing. There are really only three exceptions. One is Regions that I just mentioned. Now, that engagement process is still early on. Hopefully, that'll pan out well. The others would be Amazon and Starbucks. Starbucks is going to seek no action from the SEC and try to exclude our proposal. We're still waiting to see what Amazon's going to do, but that engagement process was not the most professional and not the friendliest.
Well, what can people that are listening or watching to my show do to help companies like Amazon figure out that they need to at least take your call and listen carefully?
Yeah, when they did take our call, they did listen. The engagement was just not as friendly as some of the other engagements. But I think the main issue is awareness. Once we see how this process concludes, again, we're still in the process.